At exactly 2:17 in the morning, when most of America was fast asleep and the world outside her apartment was wrapped in darkness and silence, a young mother sat on the cold floor of her bedroom with her back pressed against the door, her arms trembling as she held her crying child close to her chest, and her phone shaking violently in her hand as she whispered into it with the last strength she had left. "Please, someone is in my house. I think he's here. I'm scared." On the other end of that call, a 911 dispatcher listened helplessly as fear poured through every word, every breath, every pause, while sirens raced through empty streets toward her location, unaware that they were already too late. Because just moments later, in the middle of her desperate plea for help, her voice suddenly vanished, leaving behind nothing but silence, static, and a haunting mystery that would torment investigators and devastate a community for years to come. Before we go deeper into this heartbreaking story, if you value powerful, emotional, and deeply researched crime stories that give a voice to victims who can no longer speak for themselves, kindly support this channel by liking this video and subscribing, because your support allows us to continue sharing stories that deserve to be heard, remembered, and understood. This is not just a story about a woman who called 911 and never finished her sentence. This is a story about a mother who fought silently to protect her child, about a life that looked perfect on the outside, but was quietly falling apart behind closed doors, about warning signs that were ignored, fears that were hidden, and truths that were buried until tragedy forced them into the light. It is a story that exposes how danger can live inside familiar faces, how love can slowly turn into control, and how sometimes the most terrifying moments happen in places that are supposed to feel safest. Most importantly, it is a story that forces us to confront a disturbing question. How could someone beg for help in real time, be heard by emergency services, and still lose her life before anyone could reach her? To understand what happened to Lily Carter, we must first understand who she was before fear became part of her daily reality. Lily Carter was 26 years old when she died, but in many ways, she carried the warmth, optimism, and emotional strength of someone far older. She grew up in a quiet neighborhood outside Phoenix, raised by parents who believed in discipline, honesty, and compassion, and who worked tirelessly to give their children stability and opportunity. From a young age, Lily showed an unusual level of empathy, often volunteering at shelters, helping classmates who were struggling, and dreaming of becoming a nurse so she could one day care for people who felt powerless and afraid. Friends described her as gentle, soft-spoken, and deeply loyal, the kind of person who remembered birthdays, checked in when someone was having a bad day, and believed that love could fix almost anything. She was not reckless, not impulsive, and not attracted to chaos. She wanted peace, security, and a family of her own. When she met Marcus Reed at 21, she believed she had found exactly that. Marcus was charming, confident, and socially skilled in ways that made people instantly trust him. He worked in real estate, drove a clean black SUV, dressed sharply, and spoke with certainty about his future. He told Lily he wanted marriage, children, and stability. He promised her protection. He promised her loyalty. He promised her safety. Within months, they were inseparable. Within a year, Lily was pregnant. Within 2 years, they were living together with their daughter, Ava, in a modest apartment complex that seemed like the beginning of their dream life. From the outside, everything looked perfect. They posted smiling family photos. They attended birthdays and holidays. They walked hand in hand at community events. Neighbors saw Marcus carrying groceries and Lily pushing Ava in a stroller. No one suspected anything was wrong, but perfection was an illusion. About a year before her death, Lily began to change in ways that were subtle enough to go unnoticed by most people, yet obvious to those who loved her closely. She became quieter. She stopped sharing personal stories. She avoided gatherings. She declined invitations. She began making excuses for why she could not meet friends. She started deleting social media posts without explanation. She no longer laughed as freely as she once had. Her best friend, Jasmine Morales, later revealed that Lily had confided in her during late-night phone calls, admitting that Marcus had become controlling, jealous, and emotionally unpredictable. He monitored her phone. He questioned her movements. He accused her of cheating without evidence. He isolated her from friends. He made her feel guilty for wanting independence. At first, Lily tried to rationalize it. She said he was stressed. She said he loved her too much. She said it was temporary. But over time, his behavior escalated. Arguments became more intense. Insults became frequent. Threats became subtle but terrifying. And fear slowly became part of her daily life. Yet she never filed a police report. She never publicly accused him. She never officially labeled it abuse. Like many victims, she believed she could fix it. Eventually, the relationship collapsed under its own weight. After a particularly violent argument witnessed by a neighbor, Lily ended things with Marcus and asked him to move out. He resisted at first, then reluctantly agreed. Legally, he was no longer living there. Emotionally, he never left. He continued showing up unannounced. He continued sending hundreds of messages. He continued calling at all hours. He continued demanding access to Lily and Ava. He told friends he was fighting for his family. But Lily told Jasmine she felt trapped. She said she was afraid. She said he was unpredictable. She said she did not know what he might do. Still, she hoped he would eventually move on. She was wrong. On April 14th, Lily spent the day like any other devoted mother. She took Ava to the park. She bought groceries. She prepared dinner. She cleaned the apartment. Security cameras later confirmed her movements. Nothing appeared unusual. Marcus arrived that evening. Neighbors reported raised voices. They heard arguing. They heard crying. But no one called the police. Because arguments were normal. Because people mind their business. Because no one imagined what was coming. By 10 p.m., the lights went out. Silence returned. But inside that apartment, tension was building. At 1:58 a.m., Lily sent a text message to Jasmine that would later become one of the most painful pieces of evidence in the case. "I'm scared. If anything happens to me, remember I love you." Jasmine was asleep. She never read it. 19 minutes later, Lily dialed 911. The dispatcher immediately sensed panic in Lily's voice. She was whispering. Her breathing was shallow. Her words were rushed and broken. She said someone was inside. She said she thought it was Marcus. She said she was hiding with her daughter. She said she had barricaded the door. When asked why she believed it was him, Lily hesitated. Then she whispered, "My ex, my baby's father." That hesitation would later haunt investigators. Was he nearby? Was she afraid to say his name? Was she still protecting him? The dispatcher instructed her to stay quiet, to stay hidden, to stay on the line. Lily whispered that she could hear footsteps. She said he was calling her name. She said he was promising everything would be okay. Then came a loud crash, a gasp, a child's scream, and silence. Police arrived within minutes. They found the door unlocked, furniture overturned, glass shattered, the bedroom door broken, Lily lying motionless on the bed, Ava crying beside her. Alive, but traumatized. Lily was gone. Investigators immediately focused on Marcus. He had history. He had motive. He had been named. But surveillance footage revealed something disturbing. His SUV had left the complex 30 minutes before the call, and never returned. So if he was not there, then who was? Why did Lily believe he was? And who was in her home that night? If this story has already moved you, disturbed you, or made you question how well we truly know the people around us, gently support this channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts in the comments, because your engagement helps keep these stories alive. When detectives walked out of Lily Carter's apartment in the early hours of that morning, carrying sealed evidence bags and heavy expressions, they already knew this case would not be simple, because nothing about her final moments fit neatly into a predictable pattern. A woman had called 911 in terror, identified her ex-partner as a possible intruder, gone silent mid-call, and been found dead minutes later. Yet the very man she feared most appeared to have been miles away when it happened. From the beginning, the case seemed to defy logic, forcing investigators to confront a painful reality. Either Lily had been wrong in her final moments, or someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to hide in plain sight. The first priority for homicide detectives was reconstructing Lily's final 24 hours with absolute precision, because in cases involving domestic conflict, timing often reveals motives that witnesses cannot. Surveillance footage from nearby stores, traffic cameras, and the apartment complex entrance was collected and synchronized, creating a minute-by-minute map of her movements. It showed Lily returning home just after sunset, carrying groceries and speaking briefly to a neighbor, then entering her apartment alone with Ava. Hours later, Marcus's vehicle arrived, stayed for approximately 90 minutes, and then left shortly before midnight. After that, no unfamiliar vehicles were recorded entering the parking lot, which raised the unsettling possibility that the person who killed Lily might have been inside the building long before anyone realized. Inside the apartment, forensic analysts worked carefully, documenting every detail with almost obsessive precision, because the smallest oversight could erase the truth forever. They photographed footprints near the balcony door, dusted surfaces for fingerprints, collected fibers from the carpet, and analyzed blood spatter patterns to understand how the attack unfolded. The evidence suggested that Lily had been assaulted in the bedroom after attempting to block the door, confirming her desperate effort to protect herself and her child. There were signs of struggle on her arms and neck, but no weapon was recovered, indicating that the attack was sudden, personal, and intensely emotional. One of the most disturbing discoveries came from Lily's phone. When digital forensic specialists accessed her device, they uncovered dozens of unsent messages, deleted conversations, and voice memos that painted a completely different picture of her life than anyone had known. In private notes recorded late at night, Lily spoke about feeling watched, followed, and emotionally hunted, even after Marcus moved out. She described strange encounters in parking lots, unfamiliar numbers calling and hanging up, and moments when she felt someone had been inside her apartment without her knowledge. At the time, she had dismissed these fears as anxiety, exhaustion, or paranoia caused by stress, but in hindsight, they sounded like warnings no one had taken seriously. Among these digital records was a folder labeled "Just in Case." Inside it were screenshots of threatening messages from an unknown number, messages that read, "You can't hide forever, you belong to me, and if I can't have you, no one will." Investigators immediately traced the number, expecting it to lead back to Marcus, but the results shocked them. The phone was registered under a prepaid account purchased with cash and activated only weeks earlier, making it nearly impossible to track without deeper analysis. Whoever had sent those messages had deliberately erased their trail. This discovery shifted the entire investigation. Until that moment, detectives had treated Marcus as the primary suspect. Now they had to consider the terrifying possibility that Lily had been stalked by someone else entirely, someone who had watched her routines, learned her schedule, and waited patiently for the perfect moment to strike. The next major breakthrough came from Lily's laptop. Hidden behind ordinary documents and photos was a password-protected journal that she had never shared with anyone. When investigators gained legal access and decrypted it, they found detailed entries describing repeated encounters with a man she referred to only as D. She wrote about seeing him near her workplace, at the grocery store, outside Ava's daycare, and even near her apartment complex late at night. She described him as polite at first, then increasingly invasive, asking personal questions, offering unsolicited help, and appearing wherever she went. At first, Lily thought it was coincidence. Then she realized it wasn't. She wrote that he once told her, "I know you better than anyone else does," even though they had never been formally introduced. She wrote that he knew Ava's name before she ever told him. She wrote that he once asked if she felt safe alone at night. Those entries ended 3 weeks before her death. After that, there were no more updates, which raised a chilling question. Had Lily stopped writing because she thought the danger had passed, or because she was too afraid to document it anymore? Detectives began cross-referencing her workplace records and found that Lily had recently transferred to a new clinic after reporting uncomfortable interactions with a maintenance contractor. That contractor's name was Daniel Brooks. Daniel was 34, worked irregular hours, and had access to multiple buildings in the area. He had been assigned to Lily's previous clinic and had requested additional shifts near her apartment complex shortly after her transfer. When investigators ran his background, they discovered prior complaints from 2 other women who had accused him of harassment and obsessive behavior, though none had resulted in charges. When police brought Daniel in for questioning, he appeared calm, cooperative, and eager to help. He claimed he barely knew Lily, insisted any encounters were professional, and denied ever contacting her outside of work. However, when confronted with phone records linking his device to the prepaid number used to send threats, his demeanor changed instantly. His voice tightened. His answers became vague. His eye contact disappeared. Yet he still denied involvement. He claimed someone must have stolen his phone. He claimed he was being framed. He claimed he had been home alone that night. Unfortunately for him, digital evidence told a different story. Cell tower pings placed his phone less than a mile from Lily's apartment at the time of the 911 call. Wi-Fi logs showed his device briefly connecting to a nearby network minutes before the attack. And traffic cameras captured a vehicle matching his leaving the area shortly after police arrived. Still, there was no direct proof he had entered the apartment. No fingerprints. No DNA. No eyewitnesses. No weapon. The case stalled. Public pressure mounted. Media outlets accused police of incompetence. Online forums exploded with theories. Some blamed Marcus. Some blamed law enforcement. Some blamed the neighbors. And some believed Lily's killer would never be found. Meanwhile, Lily's family lived in constant torment, knowing pieces of the truth existed, but were still out of reach. Her mother replayed the 911 call every night, listening for clues in her daughter's breathing. Her father studied court documents obsessively, convinced something vital had been overlooked. And little Ava grew up asking questions no child should ever have to ask. Then, nearly a year later, a forgotten piece of evidence resurfaced. A device no one had taken seriously. A recording no one had fully analyzed. And a silent witness that had captured everything. If you are still watching, it means Lily's story has touched you in some way. And if you believe stories like hers deserve justice, awareness, and remembrance, gently support this channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts in the comments, because your engagement helps give victims a voice long after they are gone. The case of Lily Carter had already left investigators exhausted, emotionally drained, and painfully aware of the human cost behind every number in a report. Months had passed since her death, yet no arrest had been made, no conviction secured, and no explanation given for the final terrifying minutes she had spent on the floor of her apartment, hiding from a man who should have protected her, but did not. Yet despite the overwhelming frustration, one small, overlooked piece of evidence was about to shift the investigation in a direction no one anticipated. A discovery so subtle it had been dismissed initially, yet so significant it would eventually expose the darkest truths about that night. It all began when Detective Serena Morales, a meticulous and highly intuitive officer with a reputation for solving cold cases, decided to revisit Lily's apartment security footage, not the footage of the surrounding streets or parking lots, but the feed from a small, internal camera that monitored the building's lobby. Initially, it seemed unremarkable, day-to-day arrivals, routine movements, and nothing that screamed evidence. But Morales had learned early in her career that crimes often left fingerprints not in obvious places, but in the patterns and timing of behavior that, when carefully scrutinized, revealed intent. On replaying the recording frame by frame, she noticed a figure, slightly hunched, casual in gait, lingering near the elevator for an unusually long time. This individual's face was obscured by shadows, the hood of a sweatshirt, and a backpack slung tightly over one shoulder. What made it strange was the timing. The footage showed the figure exiting the lobby precisely 23 minutes before Lily's 911 call, yet no one had reported seeing anyone enter or leave around that time. Detectives cross-referenced the figure's appearance with the building's entry logs. Swipe card data revealed no registered entry at that exact time. Morales's instincts told her that whoever this was, they had found a way to bypass security, someone familiar with the building's layout, someone who had planned to appear invisible. Her gut told her that the man or woman captured by that subtle, grainy footage was more than just a random stranger. He was the person Lily had feared, the one sending her threats, the one whose presence had terrified her enough to call 911. The breakthrough came with the discovery of a tiny audio recorder. It had been hidden behind the baseboard in Lily's bedroom, a device intended to capture background noise for her own sense of security, though she had never thought to turn it on regularly. When the recorder was finally powered up and its contents reviewed, investigators were stunned. Faint but discernible, the device had captured the very sounds of her final struggle. The distorted voice of a man issuing commands, and most heartbreakingly, the terrified whimpers and protective cries of Lily shielding her child. Every officer who listened to that recording felt an unshakable, visceral understanding of the terror she experienced in those last minutes, a sensation so raw it transcended words, echoing the panic and helplessness she had endured. The audio analysis provided critical new leads. Linguistic experts identified speech patterns, inflections, and subtle idiosyncrasies that matched Daniel Brooks, the maintenance contractor previously suspected but never formally linked. The evidence was no longer circumstantial. It was auditory proof placing him inside the apartment at the time of the murder. More than that, the recording revealed a crucial mistake. The killer had spoken Ava's name, the child's name, without realizing Lily's phone was recording. It was a slip, a momentary lapse of caution, and it confirmed that the killer had been intimately aware of the apartment's layout, Lily's routines, and her patterns of vigilance. While forensic experts combed through the recording for further clues, detectives revisited all digital evidence, text messages, unsent drafts, deleted social media posts. When combined with the timing of Daniel Brooks's movements, the pattern became undeniable. He had carefully monitored Lily for weeks, learning when she would be alone, how she managed her routines, and exactly when she was most vulnerable. Every threatening text, every shadowed sighting, every subtle harassment incident built toward a horrifying crescendo, the attack that ended her life. Yet the case still faced one obstacle, proof that could survive court scrutiny. Without physical evidence linking Daniel to the actual act, prosecutors knew they risked dismissal. But Morales had an insight. The elevator footage, previously dismissed as grainy and ambiguous, actually held a subtle clue. A reflection in the polished metal of the elevator doors revealed part of Daniel's face and the distinctive gloves he wore during the attack. Combined with the audio evidence and digital trail, investigators finally had enough to confront him. When Daniel was summoned to the precinct for questioning a second time, detectives presented the recording. The sound of Lily's desperate voice, the child's cries, and his own voice repeating intimate knowledge of the apartment created a moment of unbearable tension in the interrogation room. At first, he attempted his usual tactics: denial, confusion, misdirection, but the evidence was overwhelming. His composure faltered. When pressed repeatedly about the audio recording and the surveillance reflection, Daniel confessed. Not fully at first, but in fragments, with hesitation and visible panic. He admitted to entering the apartment that night, to confrontation with Lily, and to the fatal struggle that ended her life. The confession was chilling, not merely for the act itself, but for the deliberate planning and the cold detachment he had shown. He had stalked her systematically, calculated every move, and had no remorse during the questioning. The child, Ava, had survived purely because Daniel had been focused solely on Lily, and even that survival seemed almost incidental to him. Investigators later described the case as one of the most emotionally taxing in recent memory. They had navigated false leads, misleading alibis, digital deception, and months of dead ends. Yet the final revelation, the audio recording, the overlooked reflections, and the digital breadcrumbs proved that justice could prevail when diligence, intuition, and perseverance were combined. By the time the case went to trial, the story had captured national attention. News outlets reported on the chilling details of her 911 call, the bravery of Lily's protective instincts, and the meticulous investigation that brought a dangerous predator to justice. Advocates for domestic violence awareness emphasized the warning signs, the importance of listening to victims, and the deadly consequences of ignoring subtle threats. Through all of this, the most haunting aspect remained, the moments leading up to her death. No one could forget the sound of her voice, the whispered fear, the desperate plea for help, and the unbearable silence that followed. It was a story that reminded a nation how fragile life can be, how bravery can exist in ordinary people, and how even in the darkest circumstances, diligence and attention to detail can reveal the truth. As investigators finally closed the chapter on Daniel Brooks, Ava and Lily's family began the painful process of healing. Counseling, community support, and advocacy became central to their lives, turning grief into purpose. Lily's memory remained alive, not merely as a tragic victim, but as a symbol of courage, vigilance, and the importance of paying attention to the signs that can prevent further tragedy. If this story has impacted you, if it moved you, or if it has made you question how much we truly understand about the people around us, kindly support this channel by liking, subscribing, and leaving your thoughts in the comments. Every story we share ensures that the voices of victims like Lily Carter are not forgotten, and every click and share helps raise awareness of the hidden dangers that exist in everyday life. The day Daniel Brooks was finally led into the courtroom felt like a moment frozen in time for everyone who had followed the case. Yet for Lily's family, it was less a day of closure than a confrontation with grief. The air was thick with tension, the kind that presses on your chest and makes every breath feel heavy. Friends, neighbors, and advocates for domestic violence filled the gallery, silently united in their shared disbelief that someone could stalk, terrorize, and ultimately take the life of a woman in the sanctuary of her own home. Ava, Lily's daughter, sat with her remaining family, clinging to her mother's photograph, the only reminder of a life that had been stolen far too soon. The trial itself became a study in psychological complexity, for the case was not merely about physical evidence. It was about unraveling the subtle manipulation, obsessive surveillance, and carefully orchestrated threats that had made Lily feel unsafe in her own world. Prosecutors began by laying out the meticulously collected digital evidence, from threatening text messages and deleted social media messages to the recordings of Daniel's presence in the building and the haunting audio captured by Lily's hidden device. Each piece was presented in painstaking detail, every timeline cross-verified, every inconsistency highlighted. They argued not just for conviction, but for recognition that domestic threats could escalate into fatal violence when ignored. The audio recording became the centerpiece of the trial, its haunting clarity leaving jurors visibly shaken. Lily's voice, quivering with fear, yet resolute in her attempt to protect Ava, echoed throughout the courtroom as the prosecution played it. The man who had meticulously stalked her sat stone-faced, yet subtle signs of unease betrayed him, his fingers tapping, lips pressed tightly together, eyes darting at the sound of his own voice from the past. Linguistic experts testified to the patterns in his speech, connecting the threats to him definitively, while digital forensic analysts demonstrated the connections between his devices, the messages, and his presence near Lily's apartment. The prosecution carefully emphasized that these were not random acts, but a premeditated campaign of terror that culminated in murder. Daniel Brooks's defense team, predictably, attempted to discredit the evidence, arguing the recordings could have been tampered with and the surveillance inconclusive. They claimed Lily's paranoia had exaggerated the danger, painting her as overly cautious, even unstable. But every attempt to sow doubt was meticulously countered by the prosecution's documentation of digital timestamps, cross-reference surveillance, and testimony from building staff who confirmed Daniel's presence near the apartment in ways inconsistent with his alibi. The defense faltered when confronted with the video reflection of his gloves in the elevator, a detail they had hoped would be dismissed as grainy and insignificant, but which proved to be a linchpin tying him directly to the crime scene. Witnesses took the stand, including neighbors who reported seeing Daniel loitering around the complex, as well as Lily's colleagues who described prior incidents of harassment and manipulation. Each narrative, while individually fragmentary, collectively painted a portrait of a man whose fixation on Lily escalated unchecked, and whose ability to exploit subtle opportunities allowed him to commit murder while evading immediate suspicion. The jury began to see the case not merely as a tragic death, but as a failure of vigilance and a testament to the calculated cruelty of a human being who believed he could act with impunity. Perhaps the most emotionally charged testimony came from Ava's family and friends. Lily's mother described the 911 call, the faint voice that spoke in desperation and then vanished, and the unbearable weight of realizing her daughter had died screaming for help while the world held its breath outside. Ava's father spoke of guilt, frustration, and the impossible task of raising a child whose earliest memories were marred by trauma. Every person in the courtroom felt the pain, and for many, it was a visceral reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of intervention. Over the course of several weeks, the trial unfolded with meticulous detail. The jury saw the patterns of stalking, the escalation of threats, the digital and physical evidence that documented Daniel's predatory behavior, and ultimately the recording that captured the attack itself. In private moments, jurors admitted to investigators that they had been haunted by the audio, the sound of Lily's voice forever imprinted in their minds, and that it was impossible to view the case as a simple act of violence. It was a lesson in obsession that can destroy lives when left unchecked. Finally, after days of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict, guilty on all counts. Justice, painstakingly earned through diligence, expert testimony, and the courage of those who refused to let Lily's story fade into obscurity, had prevailed. Daniel Brooks was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, ensuring that the man who had taken so much would never again have the ability to inflict harm. Yet even with a conviction, the aftermath was far from easy. Ava, now old enough to understand fragments of what had happened, struggled with fear, grief, and the absence of her mother. Family members entered counseling to process trauma, joining support groups with others who had lost loved ones to preventable acts of violence. Community members organized educational programs to raise awareness about stalking, harassment, and the early signs of domestic violence, ensuring that Lily's tragedy became a catalyst for prevention rather than a story that ended in silence. Detective Serena Morales and her team, having poured months of investigative work into the case, reflected on the journey. They knew they had saved Ava from further harm, uncovered critical evidence that could have remained hidden forever, and restored a sense of justice, but the emotional toll remained profound. Each officer understood that no number of convictions could ever undo the trauma endured, the voice that had gone silent, or the life that had been brutally cut short. Lily's story became a cautionary tale shared nationwide. Domestic violence advocates highlighted her attempts to warn others, the importance of listening to victims, and the necessity of reporting suspicious behavior, even when it seems minor. Law enforcement agencies used the case to refine techniques in digital forensics, evidence preservation, and trauma-informed interviewing, ensuring future cases would benefit from the lessons learned. Through all of this, Lily's memory lived on not only in the hearts of her family and friends, but also as a symbol of vigilance and courage. Her hidden recorder, once dismissed as a trivial device, had become the instrument of justice. Her careful documentation of threats had revealed patterns, warned investigators, and ultimately helped secure a conviction. And though nothing could restore her life, her story ensured that the warning signs she experienced would never again be ignored. For Ava, healing would be a lifelong process. Therapy, mentorship, and community support became her foundation, yet the absence of her mother was an unhealable scar. Each milestone birthday and first day of school reminded her of what had been taken. Still, Lily's presence was preserved in photographs, recordings, and in the hearts of those who had loved her, a quiet but enduring legacy. As the trial closed and the courtroom emptied, the chilling truth of the case lingered. The danger was often invisible, The predator could be anyone, and the difference between life and death could hinge on vigilance, awareness, and the courage to act. For those who followed the story, it was a reminder that even in moments of everyday normalcy, tragedy could strike, and the responsibility to protect, to observe, and to respond lay with every member of a community. If this story has moved you, challenged your perspective, or made you reflect on the fragility of life and the importance of vigilance, please show your support by liking this video, subscribing to our channel for more deeply emotional and educational stories, and leaving your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement ensures that voices like Lily's are remembered, and that awareness of domestic violence, stalking, and hidden danger continues to grow.